So, Father's Day. So it's my job to introduce the first question this morning. Before I do, I thought I would tell you a couple of stories about my own dad that links to the first question. So the first one, we all have different ideas about a dad and what a dad should be. And most of those ideas come from our father, like what he did, what he didn't do, what you think he should have done, examples of other people have done that maybe fit into a father category for you. And we take all of that in and then we produce what we think a father should be. And I've had a pretty decent father, actually, most of my life. I'll be perfectly honest. I've been very privileged. He's been a good guy. But I've got a couple of stories. I mean, I've got a million stories about him, I'll be perfectly honest. But I've got two that spring to mind this morning about him and some of the sort of things that he's put into my mind about what a father should be. And the first one is when I was 13 and my brother will have just turned 11. So I think we were like Megan and Emily's age-ish, around that way, if you can imagine that. We went on holiday to London with my mum and dad. And my dad gave me and my brother, 11 and 13-ish, a Zone 1 and 2 travel card for the tube, £35, and a BT phone card, if you remember those, that meant we got free calls to his mobile at any time, and said, have a nice afternoon in London. And off we went. Now, even then, I feel like that was a bit controversial. Today, it'd be a child protection issue, I think. But even then, it was a bit controversial. And off we went. They left us in Leicester Square. Me and my brother didn't even like each other. So he was like, see ya, I'm off. And off he went. And I was like, 35, I mean, now 35 quid, let's imagine it's probably nearer like the 50, 60 quid mark now in terms of the equivalent. So I went and I got myself a theatre ticket for a matinee performance of the Reduced Shakespeare Company because I loved going to the theatre. I bought a Coke and I walked. I didn't even go on the tube with my travel card. I walked to the theatre because it wasn't that far away from the Leicester Square box office place, and I enjoyed a lovely afternoon at the theatre. It was great. Didn't have to use my BT phone card. Kept that in my pocket for a later date. In fact, I didn't even spend my whole 35 quid. I managed to buy a mug from the Reduced Shakespeare Company at the end because I had change from my ticket. My brother got on the tube at Leicester Square, got off the tube at the end of Zone 2, walked a considerable distance, then bought a ridiculous amount of, like, UK merchandise, like flags and hats and nodding queens, tried to get back on the tube, but couldn't because he was in the wrong zone and had no money. And lost his BT phone card on the tube somewhere along the way. So he had to then go and find a policeman, which when he was 11, he described that as a policeman who would move. So I don't know where he went, whether he went to Buckingham Palace at some point and found the guards that didn't move, but a policeman that would move and would talk to him. Luckily, he knew my dad's number. I think he might have given us them on a bit of paper as well. And they rang my dad, and my dad then had to travel into Zone 4. Like, he'd gone miles. I don't know whether he'd bought, like, an extra ticket. I don't know what he had done. My dad had to travel miles to pick him up and then travel back. Now, I tell you that story because I think Claire talked a few weeks ago and she talked about like helicopter parenting and all the risks that are involved with that. My dad was like the complete opposite end. He was like, go forth and get lost. Like, off you go. But actually, as an adult now, I look back and I'm really like kind of pleased, I guess, that he put us into some of those situations because it allowed us to grow up. He trusted us. He gave us what we needed to kind of reduce the risk a little bit for most of us, maybe not my brother, but for me at least, and said, you know, here's some stuff, like go and learn how to be an adult a little bit. Like, I'm going to trust you with this within a sort of safe parameter. And for me, like, that's brushed off a little bit in my parenting, and what I hope for my kids and their dad is that he would say, do you know what, I'm going to give you a little bit of trust here. This is going to be really hard for me. It can't have been easy for my dad. Like, I joke about it, but I can't believe he just sent me into London like, woohoo, off you go. I'm sure he thought, this is a bit risky. Do you know, this is a bit hard. But actually now, I would go to London and travel around anywhere, really, or to anywhere in the world. I'm not really fussed, because now I know if you've got the right stuff, if you've covered all the bases, you get home, it'll be all right. So now I'm not scared of that kind of stuff. So I really appreciate my dad for that. The other quick story I wanted to tell you is when we were about 6 or 7, we went to Mallorca or Menorca, one of them, can't remember. And we went on holiday. And we used to play on holiday, I'm sure many parents here have played the game of Jaws, where somebody travels around like this in the swimming pool and makes the noise, and all the kids run away as fast as they can, and whoever's being the jaws has to try and catch them. Well, we, like most families, played that game quite regularly, and my dad would disappear under the water, the fin would go, and then he'd drag us under by our feet, because he took no prisoners, I'll be honest. It was like, swim or drown, that's your option. And so we were in Mallorca playing the game. The pool was fairly empty. It was empty playing field for us. We ran all over the place and swam, running in water like you do, like quick, get away, not moving anywhere. And my dad came in, and I saw him coming with this fin, and he gave me the eyes like, I've seen you, and I'm coming after you, and went one last, and then disappeared, and I was like, oh no. So I went running off, and as I did, this elderly lady slid into the pool where I'd been, and my dad grabbed her leg and pulled her under with one swoop. Now, I can only imagine he must have had his eyes shut under the water, because at 7, I don't think my legs looked anything like this elderly lady's legs. And he stood up, victorious, like, da-da! As this elderly man, jumped into the water to rescue his wife. The whole thing was, now my dad, he was definitely very apologetic at the time. Me and my brother, I don't think we stopped laughing for the rest of the week. It was like every time we saw her, my mum was like, there's your lady, Terry, there she is. And she's like avoiding him at all costs, giving him this death stare. I tell you that story because although there was lots of other stuff went on in life, my dad was a lot of fun. Do you know, he brought the fun most of the time. I have got a lot of stories about him and his ridiculous antics in different places we went because he brought the fun. And so for me, when I think about what the word father means, it's somebody who will take some fairly big risks, but also offer you an element of safety. And it's somebody who will bring a whole lot of fun as well. Now, the first question this morning is, what comes to mind? Hang on, I can't read it backwards. I think I was going on the right front there. But what words does father bring to mind for you on your tables? And each of us will have very different things. Now, there are some Post-its and some pens if you want to write those down. I mean, you can just stick them all around your table, I think. That might be the best option, unless anybody wants them sticking anywhere else, in which case, shout up now. Just stick them on your tables. And we'll give you 5 minutes. There's a 5-minute timer on there, just to discuss that and put some words down for you about what comes to mind when you hear the word father.
Hello. That's your 10 minutes. No, that was 5 minutes, sorry. Wow, that was quick. I was just going to say you can carry on just with your conversations for another 10 seconds if you want to enjoy them for a little longer. Oh dear. So, it's my day today. I'm a father. It's my 8th Father's Day today. Oh, thanks. I expected that. So, the gifts get slightly better each year, actually. This year, I've been treated to an experience gift. I've been given like a bit of a survival weekend. It's the opportunity to look after my boys by myself for the whole weekend and try to make sure they're still breathing at 51 minutes past 4 this afternoon when the train comes back. Oh, and a Toblerone. And squashies. Yeah, and squashies. You know. How do you know that? How do you know? So the other thing about Father's Day as well is that just when you think you can sort of put your feet up and relax at the end of the relentless survival effort with a nice cool beer ready to watch the football later, yeah? You remember something. You remember that you've got a dad too. And you've forgotten to get him a gift. And it's not just my day, it's his day too, and I have to do something nice for him. Fortunately for me, I've got a Toblerone at home. So one of the other great things about being a father, of course, is that you're allowed to do dad jokes. Dad jokes, yes. I've got fans of dad jokes. And basically, from what I can tell, is that they're the same as the jokes that I used to tell before I was a dad, but now instead of people laughing at them, they groan. This doesn't seem fair to me. So you can't tell jokes once you're a father, but I'm going to try now. I've got a couple here, a couple of my favourites. So I was at my friend's funeral, and his wife asked me if I wouldn't mind saying a quick word. So nervously I stood there holding back the tears, and I said, "Bargain." And I sat back down. She leaned over and said, "Thank you. That means a great deal." See? If I'd told that a few years ago before kids, you'd have gone, Has anyone got a better one than that? You can have the mic. Nope. How do you cut the ocean in half? With a seesaw. Oh, he's throwing stuff now. Got one more. I went to the zoo yesterday and saw a baguette in a cage. The zookeeper said it was bred in captivity. Right, so anyway, I'm not just going to stand here and do jokes all morning. Now, my dad never let me win anything, and I think I'm thankful for that. I don't know what would have happened if, he had let me win more. I don't know how I would have turned out. But his speciality was Monopoly. Oh yes, who likes Monopoly games with the family? The only help he would offer me was flicking my counter back into the box after he'd absolutely rinsed me out of the game. And yet I'd keep coming back for more. And I didn't win till I think maybe I was about 25, something like that. But there was a little tear in his eye. I'm not sure whether it was pride or bitterness or what, but a tear's a tear. I'll take it. But being a dad can be quite hard to navigate. We've got phrases like toxic masculinity floating around in the air, which can make it quite tricky to understand as a dad what values are important when you're raising kids. I was brought up in a time where you'd still be told to man up and not show your emotions, and boys will be boys, and all that kind of thing. So you kind of just accept that that's how the world works when you're a child. And as a parent, nowadays, it still wants to come out of you, and so it's quite confusing to figure out which masculine traits are actually appropriate to nurture. Now, this is obviously a huge topic, and I'm not going to cover the whole grounds of it now, and I know we're going to touch a bit more on some of these things later, but for this first section, I've got a little clip that I'm going to show you, which will either trigger you or thrill you. I'll be interested to know which way around it is for you, right? So it sparked a good debate in our team chat the other day. So let's see what we think. Okay, we're going to watch it together. Don't worry about putting the sound on or anything because it's got Hungarian commentary on it, but it's a football match. And just before the match started, an opportunity was given to this boy here on his birthday to score a goal. Let's see what happens. Oh, he's got another try. And there you go. So, that might be dad in goal, but, he's got his ideas. So let's have a chat about what we've just seen, right? Was he right to do that? Why would a goalkeeper stop a child from scoring in front of a stadium full of people on his birthday? In fact, for a bit of fun, right, on your table, we'll have a chat about this, but why not nominate someone, or someone can nominate themselves, on your table to be the goalie in that scenario and defend why you would do that in that scenario? And see what comes up. So, just allow the conversation to flow wherever it goes on this, and in about 10 minutes we'll move on to something else. Okay, off you go.
Okay, I hope you're enjoying your discussion so far. We are going to just turn a little bit to the way that we frame things in life. I want to look at the philosophy a little bit of what it means to be a man, because I think that is a big part of how we father and how we measure men and the fathers that we've had in our life. So I'm going to show a video in a minute from the School of Life. Called How to Be a Man. But I just wanted to share a little story of something that come up on our table because when I was about 8, I went to some cricket training, and I was just telling the guys that it was a little similar to the experience with the goalkeeper, because I went thinking this is going to be amazing and I'm going to be this like star cricketer, and I came back in tears because I wasn't, and I'd only just started. But I remember, and this is kind of a core memory for me, my dad then framed the whole experience for me and said, I think you should go back, I think you should try again. And he told me the story of the incy-wincy spider that climbs up the spout and then gets washed down again, but then goes up again. And I think sometimes it's maybe not necessarily just what you do, but how you frame a thing that is really important to the lessons that you learn out of it. So I want us to have a little look at this video and then have some conversation off the back of it.
For approximately 80 years, the notion of what a man should be like has been heavily influenced by the idea of cool. The cast of seductively cool figures includes Humphrey Bogart, Jean-Paul Belmondo, Marcello Mastroianni, James Bond, Bob Dylan, Ryan Gosling, and Benedict Cumberbatch. The cool man doesn't try too hard. You don't see them floundering about in a panic, but they succeed anyway. They are physically confident. They can scale a mountain or saunter down a deserted street in the middle of the night. If they have to kill someone, they'll do it neatly with minimal fuss. They don't worry. They're self-contained and sure of themselves. Their trousers are always a perfect fit. They express themselves briefly, but their words are always to the point. They're not meek in the face of authority, but they don't crave power themselves. They are independent. The essential characteristic of the cool man is an aura of invulnerability well handled, without any showing off or bragging. When the house is on fire, the cool man doesn't scream or call the fire brigade. "Temperature's rising, babe," he quips to his current girlfriend as she emerges from the shower. Then he casually puts out the blaze himself. When the waiter spills a cocktail over him, the cool man doesn't get flustered. He removes his jacket and looks even better in his shirt. When his boss is being difficult, the cool man smiles ironically. He can walk away from the job at any moment. This is what, as a man, one is supposed to be like. For decades, some of the most astute and creative minds have devoted themselves to making this notion of masculinity attractive. It's been portrayed as enviable, seductive to women, and well-dressed. And the image has worked. It's what you need to be a real man. And, perhaps daily, this model of manhood tortures us with the gap between its ideals and our reality. But there's another, more realistic and more important vision of what a good man is like that's comparatively been given very much less attention and creative encouragement. This is the very opposite of the cool man, what we call the warm man. The warm man doesn't put out many fires by himself. He hasn't killed anyone either. He is, instead, very much alive to his own anxiety. He would drop the gun and would tell you he did quite candidly. What's distinctive and admirable is the warm man's relationship to this anxiety. He's aware of it, honest about it, funny with it, and yet not overwhelmed by it. The warm man has a good sense of how demented and fragile we all are. So he goes out of his way to reassure, to be forgiving and to be gentle. He's tried very hard at times to get things to work out better for himself, but frequently it just hasn't worked. The warm man has known many sorrows. He has done stupid things. He has lost people he loved. He has made daft decisions. His weaknesses have made him immensely generous to others. When the waiter spills the cocktail, the warm hero laughs. They've spilled a few cocktails themselves, and leaves a generous tip if he can. When he forgets someone's name, which he does quite often, the warm hero is ashamed, but frank, and says sincerely, "I'm really sorry and very embarrassed, I know, but it's just slipped my mind. Forgive me, help me out." When they've messed up at work, the warm person admits it, feels sorry, openly apologizes, and explains as best he can what actually went wrong and how he might put it right in the future. The essence of the warm man is vulnerability well handled. He is conscious of his flaws and failings, but uses this knowledge to become interestingly humorous and a rich source of sympathy for the secret troubles of every life he encounters. Ideally, one day, it will be as desirable to be called warm as it currently is to be labelled cool. There will be lists of the 40 warmest men under 40. Boys will come home from school and complain to their mothers, "I can't do it, I don't know how to be warm." Girls at fashionable bars will take mental notes of where the warm guys are sitting, and in the secret soul of every man there will be a quiet, steady yearning to be as warm as they possibly can.
Okie. So one of the interesting things I think it's worth us thinking about when it comes to roles that we play in society is what we actually aspire to. And I think the values that we hold fundamentally frame what we will aspire to anyway. So if we think cool is the ideal, then we'll aspire to that, and we'll try and bring our kids up to be cool. And we think, my kids need to be cool, and that is important. Now, if our values actually are warm, then we will bring our kids up to be warm. So I want us to consider the cool and the warm, and actually whether we think they are the only two options. Is there something better than cool or warm? Do you, like, if you're a guy, do you think I aspire to be cool, I don't know what that pressure is, or actually I think warm is better, or something else? If you're a lady in the room and you think, well, actually, who are the guys in my life? And my father, were they somebody that had the values of cool or the values of warm? Now, there's one more thing I just want to drop in. I know time is ticking on. This week we went to Dublin, and Dublin is famous for Guinness. And so we went to the Guinness Museum, and as well as showing you how they make Guinness, it's a very cool museum if you're ever in Dublin, there's a whole floor that's about the advertising campaigns of Guinness. Now, one of the famous ones is based on a phrase that a lady called Irina Dunn scrawled on a toilet door in 1970 in Australia. And the phrase was, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." Now, the advert, I'm not going to show it this morning because time's getting away from us, but it's what they do in the advert is that they show women doing lots of different jobs that conventionally men would have done. And then it comes up with a slogan, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." Obviously, insinuating that women don't really need men in life. Now, I think there was a struggle at that point in time where that was something that was quite contentious and that maybe they felt needed saying. But what they did in the Guinness advert that was interesting is they then showed a scene of a maternity wing in a hospital, and it was completely empty. And then it came up with the Guinness words that said, "Not everything in black and white is as simple as it seems." I think it might be worth adding that into the conversation as well, because the role of men has changed maybe over time. That might be something we can chat about on our table. Has the role of men, the values that we hold, cool, warm, something else, has that evolved as time has gone past? We've got people who are older than others in this room who may have seen that flex. Big question, do we need men anymore? Have actually the boundaries of what gender is and what the values that we assign to different genders been dissolved to a point where actually there is no value over man or woman anymore, that actually everything can be more fluid? I think it is worth having a conversation about, because at Q we want to stir the pots of what is going on in society and have real open conversations. So the questions I want us to consider, we're going to put both of these up. What are your thoughts on cool or warm man? And are cool, warm man the only options? Or is there something better? And also I want you just to consider generally, how has the role of what a man is evolved over time? How do you think that has changed? And then Joel's going to come up and finish off for us.
All right, everyone, let's wrap up this part. It's been a great morning again, some good conversation. I hope you've been having some good chats around your tables as well. So on Friday this week, I did message the group and I said, I think I'm bowing out of this week. I'm not sure whether I've got anything, and it all just feels a bit overwhelming. I was very busy, and then by about Friday evening, I started thinking, I could say that, and I've got some good thoughts about that, and good thoughts about this, and maybe I could bring this, and all started to flow. And so I put in the chat, I said, right, I'll close, I'll do 10 minutes at the end. So I've kind of given myself a bit of a daunting task, really, because the topic I want to conclude on is a little bit heavier than what we've discussed before, but I do believe it's also very important as part of this conversation and this topic that we've been discussing this morning. So I opened my laptop and I thought, right, I'm just going to start writing and see what happens. And the first thing that I wrote was, do we need men? That was the first question. Do we need them? Now, we are facing a crisis involving men in the Western world. A shift in society and cultural thinking, whilst in some areas rationally legitimate, is leading towards the collapse of strong men and masculine roles. Father absence has now reached an all-time high. Male prisons are full. Suicide is rocketing. Boys are dropping out of schools. Begs to ask the question, why? Now, striving to remove barriers in order to emancipate women and equalize opportunity is a perfectly noble aim and one that I absolutely support. But during this process, a narrative has formed in prominent academic and political circles that to be a man automatically enrolls you to the club of the oppressive patriarchy, or even worse, you are inherently toxic simply for being born male. I recently watched a 5-minute clip on YouTube the other day named, "Why We Don't Need Men." I came away from the video absolutely lost for words, which is a big deal for me because I always have things to say. I found it really hurtful and quite sad to listen to, actually. And this kind of rhetoric is causing more damage than I think we have yet to accept. We have said this numerous times at Q. You achieve progress by fighting for something, not uniting over a common enemy. A famous British author said in one of their books, "We have progressed massively through the 20th century. We're reaching some sort of equilibrium and settlement. Then, just as the train appeared to be reaching its desired destination, it suddenly picked up steam and went crashing off down the tracks into the distance. What had been celebrated and barely disputed yesterday suddenly became a cause to destroy someone's life today. And so, just a few months back, I sang the praises of women and goddesses and their role in shaping our world. This morning, I would like to do the same for men. I look at the infrastructure around us, our roads, our school buildings, swamping through sewers to create sanitation and water supplies, up on the power lines that we rely on for our energy, out in the oceans in the storms, out on the front line during war, putting out fires. The bravery of going down with a sinking ship in order that their family could take a seat on the lifeboat. Or how about the development of the modern contraceptive pill, which ultimately led to the emancipation and liberation of women? It is very easy to take all these things for granted when the system is functioning and being maintained, but they are things that we should be immensely grateful for. All of these things were not and are not achieved by yielding tyrannical power. They are achieved through confidence and competence with a desire to make our lives better. I believe the phrase toxic masculinity is incredibly harmful. The idea that your gender makes you inherently toxic is no different to the idea that the color of your skin makes you more or less a superior being. My view may be unpopular with you this morning. People are capable of being toxic no matter their race, their sex, or religious beliefs. We waste so much time playing identity politics. The fact remains that every person in every carefully constructed group is capable of malevolence, toxic behaviors, and so on. Identity politics has really tainted our perspective of a largely human condition. It is in discussing, challenging, and resolving this condition that we bring about change and transformation. Toxicity is not inherently masculine in the same way that masculinity is not inherently toxic. Toxicity comes from a lack of introspection and comes as a defense mechanism to cover repressed envy, anger, and frustration. Toxic behavior is directly connected to our emotional maturity. I read an incredible article this week about a scripture in Matthew that says, "The meek shall inherit the earth." You've all heard that one, right? Now, did you know the actual meaning of meek in this scripture doesn't mean weak? Biblical meekness is not passivity or weakness. Rather, it entails a measured, deliberate, and properly deployed power. To paraphrase one popular citation, it is carrying a sword, but knowing when to unsheath it. I love that. We sung a song years ago with a line in it. Then our sons in their youth will be like sturdy trees. This was an example of stability and strength. We don't challenge toxicity and oppression by making men weak. You challenge it by making them strong and encouraging discipline. It's one thing encouraging vulnerability, which I absolutely advocate for, but weakness is not a moral virtue and doesn't help anyone. I love the idea that martial arts is about training to be dangerous, but simultaneously learning how to control it. The capacity for danger and the capacity for control come together, and this is where the virtue lies. There is nobody more powerful than a person who can destroy but chooses not to. The narrative that male power is immoral or inherently oppressive is crippling men, because within it all, their identity gets lost. When all is viewed through the lens of a tyrannical patriarchy, we only see our evil forefathers, slavery, genocide, oppression, the negative treatment of women. Is this male power? Of course. And we have no shortage of evidence of the reprehensible acts that have been committed throughout history. But permanently removing a man's sword, whilst in theory providing peace, eventually makes things more dangerous underground. This is why young boys end up in gangs. We want to encourage and nurture this power because it is also a tremendous force for good. The West in particular is living with a kind of unearned guilt that we are to bear the shame and the wrongs of our past. And there have absolutely been wrongs, there is no question. But this is no less abhorrent than the concept of original sin. You should be judged by the content of your character and the virtues by which you live your life, not by the sins of your forefather. If a man is strong, ambitious, capable, bright, and seeks success, we should praise this as a noble trait. To suggest these values are an attempt to take one's place in a corrupt patriarchy, rather than the fulfillment and achievement of responsibility and competence, is to confuse and misrepresent the situation as men somehow buying into tyranny. This couldn't be further from the truth. Now, growing up, I didn't feel I was particularly masculine based on some of the perceived social expectations. And there is no doubt that this has existed and still does to some degree. But the weaker I felt, the more bitter and toxic I became. I simply couldn't find my place in the world around me. However, the older I have become, the more self-esteem I have attained by achieving my desired goals, my values, and my virtues, and in turn, the stronger and more powerful I have become. We don't want or need domesticated men. It renders them dependent and useless. I'm not referring to lifting up a toilet seat or putting socks in a laundry basket. Don't go away saying, but Joel said. My dad years ago talked about the importance of the ox. Domestication gives you a clean and tidy stall, but without an ox, you have no strength and the work doesn't get done. The church has been guilty of the same thing. We become domesticated and couldn't live without the priest telling us how to live, meaning we couldn't think for ourselves. Similarly, and this is a great story, did you know that we domesticated pigeons? They were more than just pets. They carried messages. People raced them. They lived spoiled lives as honored human companions for centuries. Then we got telephones and threw them out like trash, literally threw them away. Their species had already become fully domesticated, and they could now not survive in the wild. They lost all their survival instincts during these centuries as they lived encaged by people. That is why they now live in cities with people instead of the forest somewhere. It's our fault, and not only did we throw them away, but now humans curse them as winged rats, casting them as pests. But they don't know how to live without us, because I said earlier they've become domesticated, and their instincts tell us that they should trust us. So they can continue to come up to humans, beg for food, because it's the only survival skill left in their genes. They love us because they were bred by us, but now we've dismissed them. And this is the problem with domestication. People become dependent. So in closing this morning, I want to encourage and salute men. You have had and have such an important and necessary role to play in our world. We need strong men just as we need strong women. It's not either or, it's both and. Stand up tall and take the responsibility of supporting your life through competence and effort, not by the whimful fear-driven method to survive by conquering, ruling, or exploiting. So in closing today, as Mufasa says, it's time to take your rightful place in the circle of life. Believe in yourself, and there will come a day when others will have no choice to believe in you too. Thank you very much for being with us this morning, and enjoy the snacks and the coffee, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you.